So today we will learn about the OOPS concept, that is the object oriented programming concepts of Java. So in Java, let us start by classes. So what basically is a class? A class is a kind of a blueprint which we can use to define a specific type of data, even string, integer, or all classes. So any class has to start with the keyword class and must be declared public. It has to be used outside the Java file in which it is defined. And then we write public class space the class name, and in curly braces we declare the class. As we start declaring the class, first we have to declare all the variables along with their scope, such as public, protected, and other modifiers like static and the data type, and also any initial value, if any, can be specified. Then we specify the class variables with the static keyword, which will be an property, or this variable will be accessible by the class name, not by the instance variables that are instantiated or got out of the class. So then we specify a public constructor method. This method name must be the same as the class name, and this method is used as a initialization method of a particular class. So I have specified a class example with an empty method with no parameters, which just gives the output that invalid creation, means you cannot use my class like this. Then there can be also method overriding, in which we can define the same method with different type of parameters, and the method can act differently based on which type of parameter is given. So if you give no parameters to the constructor method of this class, then it will print invalid creation. And then if you give it a string as first parameter and integer as second parameter, then it will assign the first string as the class name. Here I've used the this keyword, which is used to refer to the properties of the current scope. So this dot last name assigns the value of a to class name, which is created here in scope. These sets of variables are unique to each instance that is created by the class, and it has to be accessed from the instance that we create from this class. Instance is basically a new object that we generate by the blueprint we are defining in the class. For example, if I name a class student, and then if I take out, so all the individual students will be instantiated from the student class. All will be having the same methods, variables, and properties that the blueprint or the student class is defined as. Similarly, if we pass a third argument as integer, it will assign the average to it and not declare any message. Then I have also put out this public void display, which prints out all the variables, and a get student method which returns the number of students. Also, you may define any variable as protected here, and then what basically will happen is that the user won't be able to directly access that variable of the particular instance unless and until you give some methods to which that variable can be accessed. For example, if I define a protected variable here and then just use those protected variable inside my member function, so the only way the user can interact with that variable storage or the particular variable of the instance that we create out of this class is through the methods you define and cannot be accessed directly. Similarly, we use this return keyword to return a output from a method. Now there's also a concept in OOPS called inheritance, where basically you are inheriting something from a previous defined blueprint. So class can inherit all the properties, variables, and the functioning from another class by using the extends keyword. So you have to define the class name, extends, and then you have to type or put in here the class from which it has to inherit. So special class is inherited from the class, that is class example, and so special class will be having all this code in it automatically, and then it will also be having an addition to privacy type. So I do not need to do the work all over again. I can just inherit and define the specialities of a particular class separately. So in the public class, I am calling the super method, which is used to invoke the function of the class example. For example, if somebody is creating any instance of this SPL class using the SPL class method, which is automatically invoked or called or run, so then I'm calling it super method. So all the scope will return back here, and then it will print the variable name as follows, and it will execute the exact functioning here. So here I've called the super method in all the three. Moreover, if you call the set type method, which is belonging to this SPL class, which is not of the class example, it will set the type. And then in display, I've also called super.display. So when I'm calling display of this SPL class, it will first by this keyword super.display, it will run the display function of the super class, that is this class example. It will call all these three lines, and then after that, if you are instantiating from this SPL class, then it will call this extra line. This was about the inheritance. So you must have learned about return keyword, this keyword, and the super keyword. Now let us come to the functioning and see how it works. So you must import the classes if you want to use them as the folder name, that is class data, as you can see here, this module dot the Java file in which the particular class is defined. Without importing, you may not be able to use them, but in Android this is done automatically because Android Studio takes care of all these things. But still, this is important as it may be needed to debug some bugs you may face later on in Android programming. So first, there is an example one method in which I have created a new instance, that is C1. So basically C1 is a new instance, or a new, what I should say, you can understand it like a new object, a new type of thing I have created from this class example. So basically this class example is a class that is defined. So this is a blueprint. So as soon as I create this new C1 instance, this class blueprint is applied to C1, and then you can access all the instance functionality of this particular class. So when I created an empty constructor, this should print out invalid creation. Similarly, I am using two parameters in the new constructor. So whenever you have to instantiate any object or instance from a class, you use the new keyword space the class name, and brackets you pass out the parameters will be executed by this constructor methods, the init methods, and they can be defined multiple times provided they have different arguments, so that we can differentiate this functionality. So even though I am calling creating new class example, I am using it in three different ways, so it will have three different outputs as the three different types of constructors are defined here. And this can be done with any Java method, and this property is known as Java overloading. And then I am using the c3.display, which will actually execute this code. Moving on, in the example 2 method, I have created a new SPL class in a similar order. So when I call the display method of this class, first, as I using super.display, so first this display method of the base class, or the class from which this SPL class is inherited from, that is this class example class, this display method is called, and then at last this line of code is also executed. So here now I am calling the display method, and finally there is a public int getStudents method which can be used to get the number of students as I have defined there, and you can also call this method. You must note that I have used a private variable string type. So if I want to directly access the type variable of any instance, like if I created a SPL instance s3, so if I want to just get the value of s3.type, I won't be able to get it. It will result into an error, as this is a protected variable. So this is also known as data encapsulation, in which you don't give direct access to data functions and you wrap them through common interface or unit or a gateway. In example 3, I've used the you set the type of the special class instance s3 and call display on it. So let us see what is the output. As you can see here, First, it is invalid creation method is done. Then no average given is done, as I have not passed any average in C2. Then in C3, it is created successfully without any message. Then when I call C3.display, it uses all the variables and displays me all the data. Again, class S1 is equal to new SQL class, so it will invoke the super of this class example, and since no parameters are specified, it will again call invalid creation, then no average given, and finally computer Laplace will behave exactly the same as class example. But in addition to that, it will also have its own properties, which you can see in this example 3 method I have run. So in this I have also set the type as programming class, and it is printing out programming class as the type. In addition to this, using the super display method of this class example. So this was all about Java classes, inheritance, and the OOPS concepts. Now let us start doing Android programming, as I think you have gotten enough grasp of Java programming.